My name is Dr. Daniels, and welcome to Healing with Dr. Daniels. Today's topic is the antibiotic resistance nightmare and why you should not lose any sleep over it. And this show will be airing Sunday, November 17th, 2019. Alrighty, but first, we're going to take our turpentine. Let's see. Get our spoon, white sugar, and we have a nice little, pretty good amount of white sugar here, but I also have to get our turpentine here. You should label your turpentine bottle. And this is a little plastic pipette. You can get these on Amazon. And I like to fill mine up just the neck of the pipette. There we go. It's almost up to the neck. I don't know why it won't go there all the way, but that's close enough. And white sugar. Let's just squeeze this over here so you guys can see it. This is about half a teaspoon. That's the amount that I take. And I don't think this camera is really doing it justice, but the sugar turns grayish as it gets turpentine on it. All right, water. Wash it down. And a little bit left in my lips, I wipe off. Because it doesn't taste that good. It doesn't taste that bad, but it's not that good. All right, next thing I take is Shilajit. You can see it is black like tar. I have my little spatula, this little scientific spatula. I use it in labs. Again, available on Amazon. And we just take a little bit like that. That's about 200 milligrams. And I just take that and put it in the water, let it dissolve. And I will take that either between now and the end of the show or after the end of the show if I see it's still sitting there. All right, antibiotic resistance. I'm telling you, you cannot make this stuff up. So as always, inspired by the medical industrial complex itself and the missives, that means messages that are sent. And it says here, this is hot off the press, November 13th, 2019. The threat of antibiotic resistance in the United States is higher than thought, CDC, said the CDC. Now, this is not the first time the medical industrial complex has got it like all wrong. And they even confess to us medical students in medical school, I know because I went there and sat in that seat, that half of everything they're telling us is simply flat out false. But they don't know which half, so they teach the whole thing. And every 3 to 5 years, depending on their level of confession, becomes false. Another half becomes false. So literally over a 12-year period, less than 6% of what was taught in medical school is true. So you have to ask the question, if it wasn't true, if it's not true 12 years from now, is it true now? I don't know. Depends on your particular view of truth, right? The way I see it, if it's not true in 12 years, it's probably not true now. So there you have it. But I digress. The point is, the threat of antibiotic resistance in the United States is higher than thought. So my question might be, how high is it, and what is antibiotic resistance? What does that mean? And I think it's important to put stuff in just plain old English. That means antibiotics don't work. That means they don't work, okay? So the threat of antibiotics not working is higher than thought. So the question is, how high? That'll be my mind. My question is how high. But I don't know that that's the question they're asking. So let's see what they have to say. So antibiotic resistance, they say, is a greater threat in the United States than previously estimated. And it's not going away, according to the United States Centers for Disease Control. That would be the government. And Prevention, CDC. In a report released today, That would be November 13th. So each year, antibiotic-resistant bacteria and funguses cause more than 2.8 million infections and 35,000 deaths in the United States. Just for the sake of comparison, 35,000 deaths in the United States, that's more than are killed by AIDS or homicide, just by the way, okay? On average, someone in the United States develops an antibiotic-resistant infection every 11 seconds, and every 15 minutes, somebody dies from said infection. According to the CDC, I mean, it would be an arm of the government. So we got to understand this is authorized communication, all right? So this has been carefully censored, carefully inspected, and this is exactly what the government wants you to hear. Not that it's true or false, but just to understand the source. So those figures do not include cases of infection in which with Clostridium difficile, that would be C. diff, a bacterium that is not typically resistant but can cause deadly diarrhea and is associated with antibiotic use. So in other words, you can get an antibiotic and you can die from Clostridium C. difficile, even though the organism, C. difficile, is itself not resistant to bacteria, all right? So in other words, this is a death caused by antibiotic use. Let's be precise. Okay. So the U.S. toll of all current antibiotic-resistant threats exceeds 3 million infections and 48,000 deaths annually. Okay, so now we have exceeded deaths from guns, and we're now into deaths from automobile accidents. So the death toll is rising. This is serious. Antibiotic resistance remains a significant enemy that threatens both our nation's health and our global security. Wow. And we all play an important role in stopping it. Now remember, this is a communication from the government to doctors. And so that we all play an important role means doctors and the government play an important role. And there's you, the patient, no role for you. You just do as you're told. Okay, so just to understand this communication and what they're meaning here. Okay. Using data sources not previously available and new methodology, in other words, not previously available means like censored. The 2019 threats report shows that there are nearly twice as many annual deaths from antibiotic resistance infections as the CDC originally reported in 2013. So that either means we take the 48,000 and double it, or we don't know. And so they get really vague like this, where this is twice as many as that, and this is da-da-da-da. But what's our base number? We don't know. I guess they're not even going to tell a doctor that. The good news is that we are seeing progress nationwide. Since the first antibiotic-resistant threats, now remember, antibiotic-resistant threats, let's just call it what it is. Antibiotics not working. Ineffective antibiotics, okay? Have reduced deaths from antibiotic resistance by infections by 18% overall and nearly 30% in hospitals. Again, 18% of what? We don't know. 30% of what? Hey, none of your business. But we're trying to communicate here, trying to understand. So CDC data show that comprehensive prevention strategies are saving lives. Well, that's good to know. New urgent threats. So the updated report establishes a new national baseline of infections and deaths from antibiotic-resistant germs. The report lists 18 antibiotic-resistant threats, which are classified on the basis of level of concern to human health: urgent, serious, or concerning. Okay, so urgent means like really, really bad. Okay, so first one is Candida auris, A-U-R-I-S, and Acinetobacter. All right, so it's good to look this stuff up. You know what I mean? It's like, what's Candida auris, all right? So we don't have to look too far. Just ask Dr. Google. So we have here, what is the latest on superbug Candida auris from the Philadelphia Inquirer? Yes. More precisely, it says, the fungus poses a significant risk to people with weakened immune systems. So we don't really quite know what that is by their definition, but let's see if we can get a clue here. People in long-term hospitalizations, that means you have to be in the hospital. So if you're in the hospital, One way to get rid of your risk is to get out the hospital. All right. Those who have breathing or feeding tubes or catheters. That means if you're in the hospital, either refuse a breathing tube, which would mean refusing surgery, which is usually a good idea, or feeding tubes or catheters. Let's say urinary catheters. Do you know that in order to prevent death from resistant infections in the third world country where I live, they have actually switched from catheters in hospitals to using diapers. So if you're an adult undergoing surgery, instead of putting a catheter in, they literally just put a diaper on you, and if you pee or poo during surgery, then hey, they just change your diaper after surgery before you are fully awake. In the United States, I'm not sure what they're doing these days, but when I left, they were still using catheters. Or those who were given antibiotics or antifungal medications for a prior issue. So if you don't want to die of the superbug Candida auris, the way to protect yourself is do not accept antibiotics or antifungal medications. CDC reports that 30% to 60% of cases are fatal, but in many of those, the person had another serious health issue that increased the likelihood of death. So, if you don't want to die from these antibiotic-resistant infections, then don't accept antibiotics, don't accept antifungals, stay out of the hospital, and if you have a serious health issue, let's just, again, they don't tell us what that is, but let's just say a serious health issue is one for which you take one or more medications, then you need to try and address that health issue without medication. All right. So, this is about what they had to say about Candida auris. So, basically, the take-home message here is you have this organism, but really, avoiding medical care is the most effective way, and what they say here is really the only way to avoid it. And the medical care would be treatment for your serious health issue. You need to get rid of it naturally. Hospitalization, catheters, feeding tubes, antibiotics, antifungals. So that's one. So the Candida auris situation is, can we call it iatrogenic, created by doctors? Acinetobacter and Enterobacteriaceae. This is interesting because Enterobacteriaceae is a class, a group. We have here our whole list of organisms. So if we look at this Actinobacter, we can just go over to Dr. Google. It's Acinetobacter. If we go to Wikipedia and look up human microbiota, and we got to get our definition straight here, this article lists the species recognized as belonging to the human microbiota. That means these are organisms that belong in the human body and do not cause disease. All right? Okay. So we have one article here from the medical establishment that says Acinetobacter is drug resistant and an urgent threat. Well, if we go over here to the microbiome, what do we find? Acinetobacter is a ordinary organism present in healthy people. In other words, it does not cause disease. And so we have antibiotics aimed at organisms that are actually consistent with good health. And similarly with Enterobacteriaceae, again, just take a look over here. We have Enterobacter as one of the organisms present in healthy people. And why wouldn't it be resistant to antibiotics? It should be, because, well, it belongs to the human body. And C. difficile. Now, C. difficile is something that's present in everyone's body, but only causes death once you've exposed the individual to lots of antibiotics. Now, Redfield noted that Candida auris has only recently emerged as a deadly germ. It emerged on 5 continents at the same time. Now, again, by the Philadelphia Inquirer, if we can believe them, by their own confession, this is something that affects people who have received medical therapy. Okay. And so 2013 is, or the early 2000s is when this was identified. Okay. Some samples of resistant rare fungus have been shown to be resistant to all 3 classes of antifungal drugs. The report notes that so-called nightmare infections have remained stable, which is a noteworthy accomplishment given how quickly and broadly resistant carbapenem-resistant Enterobacter has spread. So these are called CRE infections with good cause because it's so hard to pronounce. And these are just spreading all over the United States. So 11 serious threats on the drug-resistant list are Campylobacter, that's in your chicken, by the way, Candida, it's everywhere, but it's rendered dangerous with antibiotics, extended spectrum beta-lactamase producing Enterobacteriaceae, and again, this is a normal bacteria in healthy people. Enterococci. Let's take a look at our thing, see if we have Enterococci on the list. No, we do not have Enterococci on the list of harmless bacteria. However, if we go over here, no. We have to go further down to what's in the intestines. And there we find Enterococcus, Enterobacter. So yes, Enterobacter is part of the normal microbiome of human beings. And here we're upset because, or they are upset or panicked because it's resistant to antibiotics. Well, clearly, healthy people might not be healthy without it. I mean, just saying. And there's Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Let's see where Pseudomonas, if it's on our list of good players. Pseudomonas. Yep, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, another good guy, has been put on the bad guy list for extermination because resistant strains have been determined. Okay. So overall resistance to essential antibiotics is increasing in several of the 18 germs on the list. Now, this is very disturbing that they've listed on this list of 18 many organisms that are known to be consistent with good health. The new report identifies 3 additional germs that are on a watch list. Resistance in these germs has yet to be spread widely, or they're not well understood in the United States. In other words, we don't know enough about them to bother with them, which is really a relief for the medical industrial complex to admit that they don't have enough information about something and maybe they should leave it alone. That's a good idea. But the public health experts are closely monitoring them. These are azole-resistant aspergillus, drug-resistant mycoplasma, and bordetella. So mycoplasma, just for your information, is generally considered to be harmless. CDC says rapid detection and prevention strategies have helped protect people from 2 commonly associated germs, drug-resistant strep and drug-resistant tuberculosis. Vaccines have helped reduce infections from strep pneumonia in many at-risk groups, and the number of drug-resistant TB cases in the United States has remained stable as a result of effective TB control strategies. The CDC is particularly concerned about 3 antibiotic-resistant infections that are on the rise in U.S. communities. Drug-resistant Neisseria gonorrhea, that would be a sexually transmitted disease. Enterobacter, which is, again, normal flora. And erythromycin-resistant group A strep. Let's take a look at strep. Strep. Do we have group A? Well, we have Streptococcus aeruginosus. We don't know if that's group A. But there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 varieties of strep that are normally in the human body of healthy people. We must remain vigilant, um, says the government representative through its Antibiotic Resistant Solutions Initiative. The CDC will continue to take a comprehensive approach to tackling antibiotic resistance, he said. Okay, so all we really know here is that somebody's worried about antibiotic resistance. And so we have to ask. We don't have to, but it'd be nice to just ask. Okay, antibiotic-resistant nightmare bacteria is a growing threat in the U.S. So again, this is April 2014, April 4th, 2018. So it seems like it's like the annual, hey guys, we're worried, hey guys, we're worried. But let's take a closer look at this Candida auris thing. So Candida auris is a species of fungus first described in 2009, which grows as a yeast. And it's acquired in hospitals, often acquired in hospitals, by patients with weakened immune systems. But wait, it turns out that this Candida auris is actually a variety of streptococcus. So what's coccidiomycosis? Let me just get the exact name, because this is really important. The reason it's so important is because this organism is actually used in many supplements. Yep. And it was really a puzzling for many epidemiologists when they noticed that this was seemed to affect middle class people. So let's find this. Okay, so Coccidiomycosis is mainly reported. I want to find the other name for it. We will come back to it. So Candida auris, by the way, they're saying that the origin is unknown, which is always a nice way to kind of skirt the issues. So one thing to look at with antibiotics is, has the incidence of antibiotic disease declined since antibiotics were introduced? So if you're going to be worried about antibiotic resistance, there's two premises you need. One, the organisms being targeted are deadly and dangerous. Number two, the antibiotics will reduce the danger of death when used. Now, the first one, that these organisms are deadly and dangerous, we know is simply not true. Why? Because these organisms are present in the bodies of totally healthy individuals. So the fact that they're deadly and dangerous is simply, it's not true, because most people who are exposed to them have absolutely no health consequences. So that's number one. So the next question is, well, are antibiotics effective in reducing death from infectious disease? Now, if you ask the medical industry, they will say, oh my God, yes. But guess what? We have something called epidemiology. And this is from the Journal of the American Medical Association. It says infectious disease mortality, that means death rate, in the United States, and they say 1980 to 2014, but they have graphs that show 1900 to 2015. So we see here in 1900 that per 100,000 people, about 1,600 people died each year from infectious disease. All right, 1,600. And we see by 1940, this number was down to about 150, 200 people per 100,000 people. That's a pretty big decline. Antibiotics did not show up until the mid 40s. In other words, 1945, we'll call it, or 1945, 43. But what we see here is when antibiotics were introduced, the death rate from infectious disease actually went up. Not by a lot, but it went up. Then, after it went up for a year or so, it started falling down, but it never declined to the level expected by antibiotic use. So in other words, or without antibiotic use. So if you draw a line, a slope, and it's going down, you can see there's a pretty steep decline in infectious diseases from 1900 to easily 1950. And this decline was interrupted, and deaths went up from the flu epidemic of 1918 and from the introduction of antibiotics. Like, whoa, 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 whoa. If antibiotics are effective against infectious disease, you would expect the rate of infection to decline. That did not happen. So another thing is that is shocking to scientists is the rate of death from infectious disease, certainly from, if you look at this graph, 1960 to the present, has not changed substantially. And no big change. And I can tell you for certain sure, use in antibiotics from certainly 1980, which is when I first entered medical school in 1979, until the present has definitely been increasing. And so we don't see any relationship between antibiotic use and a decline in death from infectious disease. But wait, we had some pretty noteworthy epidemics, didn't we? And so here they have the West Nile virus epidemic, starting in the year 2000 and lasting all the way until 2015. So we have this West Nile epidemic, and we have these really, just eye-catching graphs. Like, oh my God, all those people died. But wait, they're measuring mortality rate per 100,000 people, and it went from 0.1 to 0.01 to 0.09. That would be 1 in 10 million to 9 in 10 million. In other words, the number of people classified, we have to use that, classified as West Nile virus was not even enough. It didn't budge or move the or change the number of people dying from infectious disease, which means then that what really happened, as a possibility, what really happened is people were labeled as West Nile when the cause of death was maybe a different infectious agent or not infectious at all. We have another epidemic noteworthy. This would be the HIV/AIDS epidemic, which went from 1985 until 1997, supposedly. Okay, so 1985, let's go find it, 1985. 1985 to 1997. So there's a little bit of a blip, no perception. So how many people died of AIDS at its peak? Per 100,000, it was 20 per 100,000. And we don't see a corresponding blip of 20 per 100,000 on this graph. So again, what was the AIDS epidemic? We have to talk about in the past, by the way, because according to this graph, the number of deaths in 2015 is just about nil. Again, what we have going on is people people died of something. I mean, the dead bodies. But was it AIDS? There's not any indication of that there was an infectious disease that caused anything. So if we look here then, what we can see is the deaths from infectious disease in the United States decline. And certainly from 1980 things really have not changed much at all. In fact, we can even say from 1970 hasn't been a change. This report, or some reports even say from 1950. So they go from 1980 to 2014, shoulder shrug. Infectious disease represented a small portion of overall U.S. death from 1980 to 2014, with influenza or pneumonia accounting for 40% of infectious disease mortality. Those were hospital-acquired infections, by the way. Major changes in mortality from AIDS, West Nile, and C. difficile occurred over this period. Major changes in those diseases happened, but the overall death from infectious disease did not change. Now, what's really unfortunate is for something like antibiotics, they're so widely used, there's actually very little data. In other words, like nobody's even counting. But the best we can get is they actually took a count. It's always nice when they count something, you know. Then you got something to hang on to. So this is antibiotic prescribing practices in the United States. And they say, well, from 2000 to 2010, antibiotic prescriptions per 1,000 people. 2010 was about 500 per 1,000. So literally, there was one prescription written for every human being, every 2 people in the United States. Now, they go a little further than this. This is people who are older adults. It was 500. For people who are a little bit younger, children and adolescents, it was 450. And for people who were just adults, as in under 65, it was as low as 350. So overall, the prescribing rate, I don't know how they came up with it, was 800 prescriptions per 1,000 people. That's a lot of prescriptions. That's a lot of antibiotics being prescribed. We won't even mention the antibiotics in the food supply. So with all this prescribing, the amount of the death rate from infectious diseases was not affected. So from the year 2000 to 2005, there seemed to be an increase, and then from 2005 to 2010, a mild decrease. So if we take a look at that, we can see if there was any, corresponding decline in infectious disease, and there wasn't. So the second premise, which is that antibiotics reduce the death rate from infectious disease, there's no evidence of that because there's no correlation between increased antibiotic use and decrease in death from infectious diseases. In fact, possibly the opposite. When you take a look at these infectious deaths and you realize that a large number of them occur as a consequence of antibiotic use in hospitals, then you have to kind of scratch your head, right? That's pretty pretty shocking. There's actually the use of the antibiotics that might be responsible for the present day deaths from antibiotics. Now, when I first read this headline, which is antibiotic resistance, the nightmare, the first thing that struck me is the lady doth protest too much. This is a quote from Shakespeare. And what it means is when the louder somebody yells something, that means the more likely that what they're yelling about is fake or false. And so this whole antibiotic resistance thing, the medical industrial complex has been screaming it loudly, the media, loud. Oh my God, what are we going to do when antibiotics stop working? Well, if you look at the data, they never did work. And so what is happening is they're saying, hey, antibiotics are not working as well as we thought, but we're going to keep using them, of course. But if you look at the numbers, there is no evidence that the antibiotics ever were effective. And what's happening is the media, the propaganda machine, is making a lot of excuses for why they don't work. Well, the organism was resistant to the antibiotic. Well, the organism was sensitive to antibiotics, but we used the wrong one. Well, the wrong dose of antibiotic was used. The wrong antibiotic was used. So all kinds of excuses. But the point is, they just don't work. So when more antibiotics are used, we don't see fewer deaths. And when we look at the organisms they're fighting, these organisms are actually members of the regular microbiome. So if we look at the CDC says that antibiotic prescriptions per 1,000 persons, 852 per year, and that's in 2016. Why their numbers differ with the other CDC numbers, no clue. But these deadly organisms that are going to kill us all are organisms that everyone is exposed to. And so the point is that if these organisms are ubiquitous, that means everywhere, then the real deal is, why does such a small number of people get sick? The answer, given to us by the medical industrial complex itself, is that those who get sick and die tend to be taking pharmaceutical agents, tend to have tubes stuck in their body by the medical industrial complex, and thus their immune system's weakened, or they're being given drugs for various medical conditions. And to go after these organisms with bigger and stronger drugs is like making a plan to destroy all plant life because a human being got sick while eating a certain plant. Does not make sense. So what's really going on here is we have a bunch of organisms, which if you look at the microbiome, you just go Wikipedia microbiome, human microbiome or human microbiota, you'll see a list of organisms that are present in healthy people, and you'll see that these so-called bad guys, for the most part, are on that list. And that literally it comes down to all-out warfare against healthy people. And it kind of makes sense when you look at the number of deaths actually being caused by antibiotic use. When I say caused, I mean you have this organism minding its own business, doing what organisms do, and then when an antibiotic enters the picture, that organism suddenly becomes deadly, dangerous, and boom, the person dies. So the situation here is that these so-called antibiotics are literally antibiotics, anti-life, and the life that they're against is any human being who, for whatever reason, decides to take them. So if you don't swallow an antibiotic pill, that'll be the best way for you to protect your health. So the conclusions are basically that 1, antibiotics never worked. 2, the organisms that are that the antibiotics are aimed against are harmless to human beings and may actually be beneficial. And we know antibiotics have not reduced the deaths from infectious diseases. It just hasn't happened. And antibiotics may have increased the deaths from infections. In other words, people who would have healed, if left alone, actually died because of antibiotics. So what's a person to do? Obviously, what you decide is best for you, that's what you should do. What have I figured out? I figured out not to accept a prescription for antibiotics, for sure. Now, the other thing, though, is why even, show up for the prescription. But the first thing is to not accept a prescription for antibiotics, because by the industry's own data, Well, you have to put together the Journal of the American Medical Association's data on death from infectious disease since 1900. You take a look at that data, and you take a look at the data as to when antibiotics were introduced. You're like, oh my God, they were never helpful. There's no evidence that a population pumped full of antibiotics is going to be healthier or even have fewer deaths from infectious disease. So they never worked. In fact, all we know about antibiotics is the harm that they do. So what would be a way to handle this? Well, first of all, if you think you need an antibiotic, you have to focus on why do you think you need an antibiotic. Maybe it's an ear infection. Maybe it's a lung infection. Either of those two have dietary causes. First of which is drinking dairy products of any kind. So remove those. So first thing, look for a dietary change. Removing some infectious food is the best thing. Dairy is the number one infectious food. Second infectious food would be meats, so animal products. Simply removing those from your diet temporarily would be a huge move. And I've talked to parents who've taken the kid has an ear infection, they stop all dairy, boom, kid's better in 2 days. Sometimes as little as 24 hours. And again, this is something, antibiotics don't work that fast. And so a simple dietary change often is huge. The next change is bowel movements. I had one patient who had pneumonia. She was over 65. And in my medical practice, I did not accept Medicare because the paperwork was overwhelming. I could not figure out how to do it, and I could not get a computer program that would automate it. So that was I could not take Medicare. But she decided, even though she was on Medicare, to come to the office and pay me. Took a look at her, listened to her lungs, like, oh, wow, you've got pneumonia for sure. But I did not want to admit her to the hospital because that would have been another avalanche of paperwork. So I said, hey, look, here's the deal. Have a bowel movement, 2 or 3 bowel movements. I gave her some suggestions on how to do it. Stop all dairy. And she got a little bit of turpentine. She went home and did that. She was feeling better in hours and all better the next day. Literally, these so-called infections are your body's normal bacteria moving from one part of your body to another part of your body. That's pretty much the size of it. And they can be expelled through the intestinal tract. So these things should not be underestimated. So what were doctors doing like in 1950, 1960, which is when these infectious diseases were just totally at their lowest point? They were doing enemas. They were having people literally clean out their intestinal tract, which caused the bacteria, any excess bacteria from around the body, to go to the intestines and out the toilet. And it was actually working pretty well. We know it's working pretty well because the number of deaths from infectious diseases were declining. Maybe it wasn't working. Maybe there was some other reason for infectious diseases declining, but they were declining. And when antibiotics were introduced, the deaths from infectious disease blipped up a bit, and then the decline, which was in progress before the antibiotics were started, resumed, but at a lower level. So if you look at the graphs, and you have to scratch your head, as to when antibiotics were introduced, the decline in infectious diseases actually lessened after antibiotics were introduced. And so it's entirely possible that had they never been introduced, we would be a lot better off. And in fact, that is definitely the case because every single quality assurance, blah, 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 discussion of this says, maybe we should use fewer antibiotics. And these are headlines. Let's use less antibiotics. Like, what? Are you kidding? The miracle of miracles, and we're going to use less of it? How could that be? So let's see if we can find the headline. This is how many articles I read to prepare for these shows. A lot of them. But that's the shocking part, which is that less antibiotics seems to be the way to go. And if less antibiotics is going to result in better health, how could any antibiotics be considered to be helpful? It's just not a first choice. Okay, so the thing you do then, change your diet, increase your poops. You can stop by Vitality Capsules at vitalitycapsules.com. I invented them just for that purpose. Increase your hydration. But antibiotics just don't have a record of solving the problem. In fact, it's the opposite. So you have to, like I said, make up your mind what's best for you. But a lot of people say, well, I base my medical and my healing decisions on science. Okay, check it out. Check it out. It's Journal of the American Medical Association, November 22nd to 29, 2016. And if you click on the links, they actually show you some beautiful graphs that will definitely have you scratching your head, because what it adds up to is all these epidemics that we are experiencing are manufactured. Because you can see that all the epidemics, they happen, but they don't result in an increase in deaths from infectious disease. So they are manufactured more in your mind with the help of the media. And so should you worry about antibiotic-resistant organisms? Absolutely not, because antibiotics never worked anyway, and they still don't work. So since they never worked, the fact that organisms are resistant to it is pretty much irrelevant. So the next decision really to make is, do you want to bother with them at all? And again, my favorite is the Easter Bunny, so I say, if you believe in the Easter Bunny, you're into the Easter Bunny, then hey, have Easter bunnies. It's the same with antibiotics. Okay, let us go tackle some questions. We have them over here. Yay! And we're going to put them right there. So this thing takes quite a few fingers in the same hand. This is more challenging than typing. All right. So Mr. H says, I have been trying to get rid of my acid reflux for almost a year now. Nothing seems to be helping. I tried mastic gum. Yep, that doesn't work. I tried ginger. Does not usually work. And apple cider vinegar. And colloidal silver. And other Chinese herbs. Nothing seems to be helping. Well, let's leave China and come to the United States. So what you can do for acid reflux. For those of you who don't know what acid reflux is, it's a burning feeling in your chest from acid coming up from your stomach to your esophagus, and it hurts. They used to call it indigestion in the old days. So the simplest way to handle this is to eat fewer meals, especially skip breakfast. So I actually did a study on this, that if you skip breakfast, then most people who have acid reflux, heartburn, and indigestion, it goes away. Boom, done. And the reason for that is people eat breakfast before basically yesterday's food has been digested. If they just give their body a little more time, like wait till lunchtime, then it goes away. So that's one possible solution. Let's just say you're already skipping breakfast. The next solution is they've actually done another study, the medical industrial complex, and found that people who have acid reflux and even ulcers, which is pretty serious, all they need to do is drink an additional 1 or 2 liters of water a day. And over a period of about 4 weeks, their symptoms are gone. So you've got two simple things. Will actually save you money. Skip breakfast, number one. Number two, drink an extra 1 or 2 liters of water. Probably a good idea to do it in the morning before lunch. And yeah, all these things that you've tried, mastic gum, ginger, apple cider vinegar, colloidal silver, and other Chinese herbs, I find to not be helpful either. Now, the other thing that might be part of your problem is your attire. That would be your clothing. So depending on your belt, how tight is your belt, and where do you wear it? So there's this big debate among men, I don't know if this is male or female, as to should you belt your pants right across your belly or under your belly and let your belly hang over. So if you belt your pants under your belly and let your belly hang over, then you're not going to interfere with your digestion and with your circulation. So you can put your pants belt in a different position. Those are the things I think would help you the most. Okay, so we have Ms. V, who's writing on behalf of her brother, who has been diagnosed with duodenal adenocarcinoma. So for those of you who don't know, duodenum is the small intestine as it leaves the stomach. All right, so the doctors did a gastrojejunostomy, which means they cut out the diseased part of the duodenum and attached the stomach directly to the jejunum, which is another piece of small intestine, in August of 2019. So September, October, November, about 3 months ago. Okay, so they found that the tumor is infiltrating the upper pole of the right kidney and transverse colon. All right, so at least they didn't take out his kidney and colon, so that's good news. I read the archives on the use of turpentine. I'm writing to know if he can use turpentine and sugar. And so the answer is turpentine sugar is pretty darn harmless, and many people who have different types of cancer have actually felt better with it. So I would definitely say it's worth a try, and you should go to vitalitycouncils.com. Make sure you download the Candida Cleaner Report so you're getting the correct latest edition of the report. Okay, Jamie says, I'm a 33-year-old Caribbean male who, unfortunately, had open heart surgery when I was 5 because the doctor told my parents I had a heart murmur. I don't have any pain. I lead a normal life. My question is, what can I do and eat to sort of reverse whatever damage the doctors may have done during surgery to my heart or keep me in good health? Okay, so the damage done to your heart, we can say, is nothing. You've recovered from it because you're an adult and you're leading a normal life. So that's really all you can expect of a heart, is to not have pain and to pump your blood. Yay. Job well done. Tell your heart, thank you. Question is, what can you do to keep your heart healthy? And the answer is just really simple, is to eat unprocessed, simple foods. So when you say you're Caribbean, I don't know if you're still living in the Caribbean or if you're in another country, but you should keep to a very simple diet and no processed foods. The one food that is bad for the heart is dairy. So if you skip your dairy, you should do pretty well. And then skip all of your processed foods, eat at home, cut the restaurants out of the mix there. Daniel says, I would like to know if you can use, that means if a person can use, brown sugar with the turpentine. And the answer is it does work a lot better with white sugar, so I would recommend white sugar. How can you treat osteoarthritis in the body naturally? The number one thing with osteoarthritis to do is to increase the hydration. And for that, you can just drink distilled water, and whatever you're drinking now, switch it over to distilled water instead of whatever your customary beverage might be. The next thing, which is really important for osteoarthritis, is poop. Poop 3 times a day. Because literally the stuff in your joints that's causing you so much pain is the poop that you're holding on to. Okay, so Jaha says, My mother's stomach looks like a basketball. She has not eaten in about a month. That's not good. No food for a month is almost never good. Since she fell. So she fell. Okay, had a fall. She's got some clear liquids, some IV solution from the hospitals, and she's 87 years old, 5 feet 7, which means she should weigh about 135 pounds, and she weighs 88 pounds. She has lost 10 pounds in the last month. She has type 2 diabetes. Okay, so she should no longer have type 2 diabetes, especially since she's in custody, so to speak. So if she still has type 2 diabetes and she's getting type 2 diabetes from what they're giving her in the hospital. She had her thyroid removed 20 years ago, and she's been in the hospital 3 weeks because she fell and broke her hip. She also has Alzheimer's. They said she has bowel blockage. Exam revealed not what I can do to help my mom. Okay, so she's got, let's say, a blocked intestine is what they're saying. Probably the best thing you could do immediately would be an enema. I would be gentle. Just give her a warm water enema. The next thing I would do is put castor oil on her belly. And then the next thing I would do would be to give her fennel. Actually, fennel tea would be nice if you could grind up all the whole bits of that. So we don't really know about the blockage. Like, it sounds like it happened after she went into the hospital. So if it happened after she went into the hospital, then it's caused by what's called an ileus. That means the intestines get paralyzed. And if she had a surgical fix to her broken hip, then this condition in the bowels is caused by anesthesia. It's caused by narcotic pain pills. So if she's still getting narcotic pain pills, then that would be the cause of her so-called bowel obstruction. It's more likely that what she has is ileus. That means the intestines are actually paralyzed. And it acts exactly like a bowel obstruction. But since we know she hasn't had any food in 3 weeks, then it's more likely that what she has is an ileus, and what she has is possibly caused by pain medicine. So the thing to do would be to ease up on the pain medicine, do an enema, apply castor oil to her belly, and see if you can gently massage it. For her personal comfort, you want her butt to be higher than her head. And that way the gas is going to move towards the butt, and that's going to relieve the pain that she's feeling from the bowels not moving. That's really about all I could tell you right now based on, the information that you've given me. But it's a difficult situation. If you like more detail, of course I would need to have more information. You can go to vitalitycapsules.com/appointment, make an appointment, and we can discuss the whole thing. You should have with you for the appointment a list of all the medicines that your mother is receiving. And hopefully you have a medical power of attorney, which means that based on whatever the conversation is, you might be able to help her to refuse or lessen some of the medicines that she's taking. All right, we are coming up on our 60 minutes here. So, of course, not possible to answer all questions. So people who would like their questions answered, there's 2 ways to get them answered. One is to schedule an appointment at vitalitycapsules.com/appointment, or the monthly membership group I have, where I actually train you and teach you how to take care of your medical concerns without health insurance, without doctor visits, or hospitals, or ambulances. And you can find out more about that at vitalitycapsules.com/heal-at-home. All right, awesome. I will see you next week. And as always, think happens.